Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
Like my OBGYN was like, this never happens. It's like, cool. I'm so glad it's happening to me.
Yeah, I'm so glad I'm a pioneer in this field. Please.
It's like, your chart is so different from anybody else's here. And
Really,
it's
the last
bigger
thing in
than
the
any
world
of
you
my
wanna
other
hear, right?
clients.
That's the last thing in the world you want to hear.
Like, this is great. So
Yeah.
that happened. And then I also got really bad mastitis, which is like an infected duct when you're breastfeeding, right? So very, very excruciatingly painful, in case you don't know. And then I ended up, when my son was about 10 months old, having a gallbladder attack. And I actually had one when I was pregnant, and I didn't know, because I didn't know what was going on. But
Right.
gallbladder attacks are wild. Like, you feel kind of like, I felt like I was having a heart attack, but I was also in so much excruciating pain, and I was throwing up constantly. It was really bad. And I remember we called 911, and the guys come. It was the fire truck guys first, and they, firefighters, I guess they like to be called. Um, they came in, and they did an ECG, and they're like, "Oh, you're not having a heart attack." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. I'll just go back to bed, I guess." And they're like, "No, you're having a gallbladder attack. You need to go to the hospital." And I did go, and ended up, it was just a nightmare. Like, they scoped me because they were trying to figure out what's going on, because my blood work was off. So one of the risks of the scope is that you can get pancreatitis. Anyways, this is like totally an aside story, but I got pancreatitis after that. So as I'm sitting there in the hospital, the treatment for pancreatitis, if you don't know, is no eating and no drinking. So you just sit there attached to an IV while you wait for this to basically leave your body.
Right.
And I
It's
got wheeled
painful,
around to
right?
all these, what's that?
It's painful, right?
So painful.
Yeah.
So then they decided, after the pancreatitis was done, that they were going to remove my gallbladder, but then I kept getting bumped. So I was in the hospital for 11 days, and it was terrible. I kept getting bumped from ward to ward. It was a nightmare, but gallbladder left and I was fine. But what really was the harder part of this was that I wasn't sleeping, because my son really didn't sleep unless he was nursing, which is problematic.
Yeah.
And also, my hormones were still, as you can imagine, quite crazy. Physically, I wasn't doing that well, but emotionally, I really wasn't doing well, because coping with one kid is one thing.
Mhm.
Coping with two kids is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And when you don't have good emotional tools, which I didn't have, it's not like I magically picked those up along the way, right? There became a day, I will never forget it. I was taking my youngest one to preschool, and in my fog of C-section pain and all the things, I remember putting him on my chest, my youngest. I had a Great Dane. I decided I had to walk the dog with me while we walked to preschool. I don't know why. And
Mhm.
so we got there. My baby cried the whole walk. Then I dropped my son off, walked the whole way back, and he screamed the whole way. And I just remember needing him to get off me. I needed him off me. He had to get off me. And I remember putting him in the bed, not gently. I mean, I didn't shake him, but I could feel like I was like on my last thread, and I had a full mental breakdown. Full. I called my husband. I'm like, I'm not okay, bawling, like the whole thing. Got on a call with a psychologist who told me I needed to be on antidepressants. So I went to my GP at the time, who diagnosed me with an antidepressant, and it helped and it didn't help. I was very numb, which helped because I wasn't losing it on my kids, which is good. I wasn't about to like shake anybody. That was good. I needed that at the time. I do see and totally understand that. What I will say though is that nobody I still wasn't being taught any emotional skills. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was just coping with this antidepressant. And I remember going to see my GP and saying, I don't think this is working because I will never forget one day I went to school with my son. Again, preschool. That's like your life when you're a stay-at-home mom and you have a preschooler. And so I walk into the door into the building where there's the line, and one of the moms looked at me and she goes, Amanda, I just really appreciate how comfortable you are not caring about how you look when you show up here." And I
Oh,
was like,
oh my gosh.
"I don't think that's a compliment."
What a wonderful thing to say. What a wonderful thing to say.
Yeah. Legit. I mean, I was just what I would say is I was barely surviving. I barely survived for a long time. And I went on another antidepressant because my doctor said when I went in and told him that I didn't think it was working, that, oh, that meant I was more depressed. So he switched me to a stronger
Yeah,
antidepressant, which
let's
was
try this.
so much
Gotta be a
worse.
pill. There's gotta be
It's
a pill.
awful. Yeah, right? And so then I was talking to a friend of mine who suffers from chronic depression, and she said that I should go see a psychiatrist because they specialize in medication. So I did. And this was both a gift and a curse because this psychiatrist told me, you don't have depression and that antidepressant isn't helping you. So you need to come off it. And just in case you've ever never had to come off an SSRI, it is a horrible experience. But on top of that, he says to me, well, I think that you have borderline personality disorder. And in a 45-minute appointment, he diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder, told me that it was an incurable illness, that I would only ever be able to just find tools to cope with it, and enrolled me in DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy. Yeah. So that went on for a long time. Like that diagnosis was hard for me to hear, hard for me to process. Um, on one hand, it felt good to know that there was a reason. On the other hand, it felt horrible to think like I have this shameful disorder. It was a really rough period of my life,
Had to have been.
and like I could still get emotional about it. It was
Yeah.
so hard. And I think that, I've told it so many times, but I really struggled for so long. And that struggle became so much harder actually,
Mhm.
because then I was so aware of when my reactions were not okay.
Mhm.
And I would just shame myself and beat myself up and go after myself for like, why are you doing this? You know better. Da, 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 right? That's your disorder. And just
You're beating yourself up for not making progress.
right.
It's like you weren't getting any help. All you were getting was diagnoses that were off,
Hmm.
right? And, "Oh, here, just take this. Just take this pill. You'll be okay." Right?
Yeah.
Right? And it's I mean, the doctor's prescription pad is not the end all be all. It's not the solution. It's
It
just
really
not.
isn't. Yeah, it really isn't. I wish more people could hear that and understand it. I think it's a very nuanced, complicated thing. And I think a lot of us have very complex lives with complex trauma combined with potentially a neurodivergent brain. And, when you asked me about when did I discover I was neurodivergent, I didn't for the longest time. I really just, I clawed my way up trying to make myself better instead of understanding that I don't need to be better. I need someone to take better care of me
Right.
and someone to teach me how to do that, you
Right.
know?
Help you understand. Yeah.
So it really wasn't until years later, I'd lost my mom. My mom had a brain tumor. She passed away. My extended family really struggled during that period. My dad, my brother, it was a horrible time. And as you can imagine, grief has its own challenges for somebody like myself, right? That really struggles with emotion.
Well, you're
Started having
already
panic
struggling, and then
attacks.
then you pile this on top of it. I mean, it's just you gotta feel like you're drowning.
You do. I would say that most women, most men, most people that have this experience where someone has said to them, "Oh, this is what's wrong with you." Um, we get enough help so that we're barely keeping our head above water. And then they leave.
Yeah.
It's like, really? This is it? This is all I get?
Yeah. And how
And
can you realize?
it's a tough thing. And I am so lucky because I had a business coach who was not a great coach for me. And she had put me onto this other coach because of her branding. And I was looking at her branding and she was a marriage coach. And I was like, huh, I could use a marriage coach because I'm sure you can imagine being explosive emotionally didn't play well in my marriage.
Right.
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 And she said she specialized in coaching type A women that were married to type B men. And I was like, oh my God, sign me up. I need this woman right now. And I started coaching with her. She did one-to-one coaching. And she was the first person that saw me, you know, and like validated me. The first person. Oh, so that for me, like, I'm so emotional about it because it was such a gift
Yeah.
that I didn't even know I needed, that I stumbled upon. And I think because I had this person that looked at me and was like, well, yeah, that reaction kind of makes sense. And I'm like, what? And help me pull apart that thoughts are not facts and that we have some control over what we think and that there's ways to navigate this. There's lots of middle here. There's lots of gray space for us to work in. And, here's how you can pull this apart and make sense of it in your brain and take care of yourself and be nice to yourself and also be nice to other people because you're being nice to yourself.
Yeah.
And,
It starts with you. Yeah.
but it has to come from a place, in my opinion, where you care for you.
Hmm. I agree.
And in order
100%.
to do that, you have to believe you're worth something,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of people walking around this earth that feel like they're worthless.
Yeah. And it's because of the struggle, right?
Yeah.
They're searching and they're struggling and they feel like there's something wrong with them. Like
Yeah.
they just they're imperfect, but they're imperfect to a way or in a way to where they're and so many people do just enough to get by. They do, and COVID was a perfect example of that, right? How fragile our society is, members of our society are, in that when we went through that 60-day shutdown and we were climbing the walls and we were going through all this anxiety and all this kind of stuff, people developed drug abuse problems and alcohol abuse problems and spousal abuse problems and child abuse. I mean, the things that happened the way people responded to it, I guess the best way to put it, was just unbelievable. I mean, it was, and it was hard to imagine that so many people were right on that ragged edge, but they were going to work every day. And so they were removing themselves from the home, right? As soon as they couldn't remove themselves from the home, everything, HE double hockey sticks broke loose, right? I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. For a lot of people,
And we
the
saw it. I mean, it was obvious. You know what I mean? It was just that was rough.
it was so rough, and I still think we're seeing the fallout from that,
We are. We are. I mean,
you know?
there are people still trying to get sober and still trying to, get off of, I mean, it's just it's I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but there are a lot of people that looked at what they were doing for a living and looked at where they were living, and there was a lot of reevaluating that took place, right? A lot of people
Mhm.
moved out to the country, and a lot of people moved out of the city, and a lot of people, right? And then all of a sudden, the companies say, "Okay, remote work's over. Time to come back to the office." And people are like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, we're staying remote, right? I like
Mhm.
working in my pajamas all day, right? And by the way, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about a friend of mine, uh,
Yeah.
good friend of mine that works all day remote every day. And the first day that I met her, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon and she walked out in her pajamas and
Yeah.
her fuzzy slippers, right? And she's like apologizing all over the place. And I'm like, I get it. It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have showered today either if I didn't have to, right? I mean, she just rolled out of bed, had her coffee, and went to work.
Yeah.
She was so focused on what she was doing that she never stopped. And it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And she's like, I'm going to go inside. I'm going to take a shower and I'm going to change clothes. I'm going to be presentable, right? I'm like, you don't have to do that on my account.
Yeah.
This is the come as you are party. We're good. So, so tell me about coaching. Why would you decide that you want to get into coaching?
You know, it's kind of like a two-part thing. So the first part is that before COVID, I was working as a fashion stylist, image consultant, whatever you want to call it. Um, Kind of struggling with that. I'd had a direct selling business that I'd done that was involved in fashion and then was trying to get out on my own and do it. What I started discovering is that so many women that I worked with, in fact, all of them just had these really horrible body images and these thoughts and beliefs about themselves that were so negative and so optional. And so I really wanted to get into coaching. And I was working with my marriage coach, and she was telling me, you could be a coach right now. You could literally just do that. And so I really wanted to do that because I wanted to be able to share what I'd learned, what I knew, and to help other people do it. Um, but I was really just walking the line. I had added coaching to my image consulting business, but it wasn't really taking off, mostly because I wasn't really selling it because I didn't really know how to do that back then. And then I had enrolled in life coach certification training through the life coach school. And I was enrolled. I knew I was going to be doing it. We went to Hawaii in March. And as you can imagine, then while we were in Hawaii in March, we had to take an emergency flight home because, COVID.
Mhm.
But it was such a gift. It was really such a gift for me because I was starting my coaching business. I was starting this coaching training. I started just doing free workshops for people, like free calls. Come on to this call. I'll help you work through the emotional impact here. I'll help you feel better about what's going on. And I did that and I started my coaching practice from that.
Mhm.
And I just started working with people. And I'm sure you do know, but when you find that thing and you realize this has always been the thing I should be doing, it was that for me. It was
I'm
so
doing it.
obvious.
I'm literally doing it.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. We're literally doing it right now.
So for me, it was something that when I started coaching people, I could see that they were so deeply impacted. I will tell you, I have had so many clients that have told me like how coaching with me has changed their entire life. And I believe it because I feel the same way about my life. And I just think there's so many ways to get where you're going, but why not pick the one that makes you feel really good about yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. And one that clarifies things, right?
Mhm.
Because, people think that they should be able to solve whatever's going on in their head
Yeah.
themselves because society has told us, oh, you need to just deal with it. You just deal with it.
Mhm.
You're fine. Just deal with it. Right.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, we really need somebody to bounce things off of. We
Yeah.
really need somebody like you had with that coach that validates you, right? You really need somebody that comes alongside and goes, okay, look, you don't need antidepressants, you don't have personality disorder. All this stuff that regular medicine is telling you is not true. All these years you've been struggling and you've been trying to conform to this unreal idea of what society thinks you should be. And in fact, there isn't a thing wrong with you. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with you. You're actually perfect. You're actually perfect,
Yeah.
right? And you're a miracle made by God.
Mhm.
So now what we need to do is we need to sit down with people, let them get things off their chest and listen to them, right? Because a lot of people just need somebody to listen. They just need somebody
Truly.
to hear them,
Yeah.
you know?
That gave me chills when you said that because I believe this fully, and they need people to see them.
Yeah,
You want somebody to see you,
yeah,
and in order to see somebody, you need to understand them,
yeah.
And in order to understand somebody, you need to ask a lot of questions.
Well, everybody wants to be cherished.
Mhm.
I don't know a single person on this planet that doesn't want to be cherished.
Yeah.
Now, they may tell you that they don't, but the fact of the matter is, everybody has that need. Everybody has that need to feel like they are cherished. And that's what coaches do, right?
Yeah.
Because you're seeing them, because you're hearing them, because you're pointing out to them that, you know what, this struggle is real. And you're not that far out of the norm. It's nothing wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
And everybody needs tools to deal with what they're dealing with to get through that struggle. Because once you get, it's why you were so emotional earlier.
Mhm.
Once you get to where you're not struggling anymore, and once you get to where you're validated and you're seen and you're heard, it makes all the difference in the world. It changes
Yeah.
everything. It changes the way you feel. It changes the way you look at life. It changes the way you treat your kids, the people around you, your spouse, right?
Mhm.
Everybody, because all of a sudden you have an appreciation for them you didn't have before because you were in this like dungeon that you were trying to get out of, right? And it was not a
Right.
happy place.
Yes.
Now
Yes,
you're
that's
at a place where you've evolved and you've come to a place now where you're validated, and it's not, the struggle is that you were in is over,
yeah.
and you're not being misdiagnosed, and you're not, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I love
amazing.
how you described that. I think it's a really great visual, and you're right. That is the truth, and I think the other thing that a coach does is they don't buy your story
Yeah,
in a good way.
yeah,
Like, you tell them the story of you, and my favorite thing to think about myself and that I also give my clients is that's not the truth about me, though. I can decide what the truth is about me,
right.
and there's such freedom in that. You get to decide what the truth is about you, even if somebody else is telling you something different. But it's really hard to do that when we feel so emotionally broken, right?
Well, you can't get there.
Yeah.
You're under all these layers of just junk, right? And once you go through what you've gone through, that goes away. It lifts all that,
Yeah.
right? And I'll bet you never felt freer.
Never felt freer. And, I will tell you that for me, I think I'll always have a coach. I
Yeah,
have a very persistent negative voice in my head
yeah,
just because of the years of experience that I've had, and also because of the way my brain works.
yeah.
And I've just learned that I can always get help for that. And I just think, like, you know, experiencing negative emotion is not optional. We all have to experience it, but experiencing additional emotional pain is optional.
Yeah.
And
And
that's the part.
and finding the tools to deal with it is optional,
Yes.
right? You can
Yes.
do that. It is available. It's out there, and you can find it and you can get better.
Yes.
You
You
can
can
get better.
find it and you can get better. I hope that somebody listening to this podcast hears that and takes it in, because I've never met somebody that can't be helped.
Yeah,
Never. I've never met somebody that can't be helped. If you want to be helped, there is help available for you for sure.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I'm going to put a link to your website on the description for the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, I mean, definitely come check out my website. On my website is also, I have my own podcast. So if you love podcasts, you could go listen to what I have to talk about. I mean, I'm an over talker, oversharer. So you can imagine that's what my podcast is like.
What's the name of your podcast?
It's called How to Love Yourself No Matter What.
There you go. There you go. By the way, just a shameless plug. I've now made myself available to be on podcasts. I just did the first one
Oh,
last week, and I'm starting to get invitations and things. So if I can invite myself, if you'd like for me to be on, I'd love to be on.
I'd love that. I think that would be so great.
I think we'd have a great time together.
Yes, I think
We
so
already have.
too.
We already have. I thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was really a beautiful experience for me, just being able to cry in front of you and all your listeners.
We made you cry like 3 or 4 times, which normally I'd get in trouble for, right? And you got the shivers a few times. I mean, this is good stuff.
It's really good stuff. This is really important, having these conversations. So I appreciate you putting this out in the world.
It really is. And people need to understand that they're not broken. They just
Yes,
need to understand that there's hope, and you can find the help. It's there.
100%.
Thanks again. I'm so glad we had a chance to meet and spend time together. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.